Hello, my name is Julie and welcome to my bi-monthly wrap-up. I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in March and in April. Let's talk about what I read in March. This is the lowest amount of books that I've read this year in a month, but a lot of these books were chunky. 2 of them were over 800 pages, so accomplishment. From my reading spreadsheet, this is the graphic for March. As you can see, again, I read 8 books in March. That's 4,457 pages. In this month, I swear to God, I only read green books, which is so ironic, which is good for March because that's like St. Patrick's Day, but is ironic because for my monthly bingo boards that I do on Instagram stories, you can find them on my highlights there. I have been doing a yearly rainbow and it was yellow this month and green for April. So I'm messing myself up, but it's fine. And the first of these green books that I read was Beth and Amy by Virginia Contra. This is a duology that is a retelling of Little Women, but the girls are now in their 20s and it's modern day. Beth was discovered by a country star. They are actually dating, but he's essentially just using her as his songwriter. She got him a Grammy, and she's really struggling with being on the stage. Meanwhile, Amy is really trying to get over our Lori character, who is called Trey in this book. Meanwhile, she has her own purse bag company that she's trying to make happen in New York. So when Joe is getting married, everybody comes back to North Carolina and the sisters come together again and all of these problems are getting solved. I liked this duology. I don't think there's much of a point of reading this if you're not a fan of Little Women. I think it's not doing fan service, but it is a return to these characters that I really love. I do think that the author properly captured these characters and puts them in situations that are appropriate for the arcs that they went through in the original. I liked that in this book we're watching both Beth and Amy kind of learn to stand up for themselves and not compromise on what they want for their lives. These 2 books were really easy to breeze through and it did feel very homey, both in that, you know, it takes place in my state, which is great, but also just returning to these dynamics. The thing that I wish for these books is that I kind of wish we had more one-on-one dynamics with these characters or more time with the sisters between each other. We have scenes where all 4 of them are in the same room and they're all bantering with each other, but I wanted more of them talking about the serious stuff together. But overall, I had fun with this, just like I had fun with the first one. So I'm giving this around a 3.5 star. And then I read The Cherished by Patricia Ward. I was sent an e-arc in exchange for an honest review by NetGalley, so thank you so much to NetGalley and the publisher. Our main character, Jo, her grandmother has just passed away and has left her house. She has not been to this house since something happened to her when she was younger. She and her mother are returning to this house, and Jo is trying to figure out not only what happened to her in the past, but what is up with the weird tenants of this house. So the one good thing that I'll say about this book is that the supernatural element, while it shouldn't have, did surprise me. I was thinking it was going to go in one direction, and it did go into a different one. I think it should have been more obvious to me that that's the direction it was going to go into. Doesn't mean I'm very smart. However, I really did not like this book. First and foremost, there was a lot of language that is outdated and off color about different people. And this is not a historical fiction. This is our main character thinking really offensive things about other people, and it's never corrected. That's in regards to mental health. I didn't love the way that people who weren't white, like their skin was talked about. And also, there was a cafe owner, when she decides to talk to somebody else instead of our main character, Jo refers to her as a, quote, Nazi baker. Yeah, that was uncool. So I was really surprised that any of this got past editing. Not only that, but the plot itself was not engaging. Joe was just not a great character to follow, and I really, really had to push myself to get through this book. There was nothing that was drawing me back to reading it whenever I put it down, which was frequently. There are a lot of redundancies when she's interacting with other people. She's not asking questions when any regular person would ask questions about what the heck's going on around her. It just didn't make any sense, like, why she should be ready to take on this supernatural baddie by the end. So unfortunately, this was my first 1-star of the year, but I do think it really deserves it because of the amount of editing work that really should have been done on this book. And then I read The Shadow Rising by Robert Jordan. This is the 4th book in the Wheel of Time series. Last year I read the first 3. I really loved book 1. That made my best books of the year. I really enjoyed book 3, which I listened to on audiobook, but number 2 was a miss for me. Unfortunately, number 4 was also kind of a miss for me, even though this is supposed to be one of the best books in the series. I think that going forward with the series, I will be listening to the audiobook. And it's making me think that I will be one of the people who does not make it all the way through this series. Our gang is splitting up again. Some people are tracking down the Black Aja, some people are going to the desert to fulfill a prophecy, and some people are going back home because the White Cloaks are trying to control the town that they grew up in. I really struggled in this book mostly, and this is something that has been true for the entire series, with the gender roles that are put on every single one of these characters. It makes it very clear that Robert Jordan holds very strong opinions about what a man is and what a woman is, and how every single man acts and how every single woman acts. Every single female character has the thought when she interacts with a man, "Ugh, men are so childish. They just don't understand anything." And every single man, when he interacts with a woman, thinks, women are so mysterious. I never know what they're talking about. They're so confusing. This happens every single interaction. If it happened just once with these young characters, or just in the first book even, that would be one thing. But one of our characters literally gets fucking married in this book. Of our 3 main plot lines, there was only one that I was really interested in, and that was Rand's when we're going to the desert. The other ones I just didn't care about. I do really like the Amerlin Seat. The Amerlin Seat has been one of my favorite characters. And then Perrin, who's been one of my favorite characters for the books. I could not care about his plot, and a lot of it has to do with his relationship with Fael, and I don't care about it. All of the pushing of the romantic relationships in the series has really been a miss, and I know that they're supposed to get better as the books go on, but that doesn't mean it was easy to get through these 900 pages with tiny, tiny text. There wasn't a whole lot that I thought that this really thick book that is one of the longest books in the series brought to this table. So in the future, I will be listening to these on audiobook, and hopefully I can continue and find more enjoyment in them than I did in this one. So I'm giving this like a 3-star. Maybe I should reread this but on audio before I continue. We'll see. Then, a shocker to us all, I read The Stand by Stephen King. I have had this on my shelf for quite a while, and I do have a ton of Stephen King on my shelf. This just happens to be one of the ones I've had for the longest. And a group of people on Instagram that I am mutuals with had a read-along that was going on, and one of my friends invited me to join them when I commented, this has been sitting on my shelf for forever. And I am so glad that I did. This is my 7th or 8th Stephen King, and 11/22/63 is the first I read of his. It is one of my favorite books of all time, and I think it's his best, and this is the only book that has even come close. This is a post-apocalyptic epic. It is about the collapse of specifically American society. There's essentially a plague that kills 99% of the population, and we follow the dregs of humanity as they are trying to come together to survive. And meanwhile, there are these supernatural forces of good and evil who are trying to collect power so that when the final battle happens, their side will win. We follow so many different perspectives, and each of them is unique and fleshed out and brings something different to the table. The original book that was published was 400 pages shorter than the edition that came out in the 90s, and I cannot imagine cutting 400 pages out of this. I think everything that was done in here was extremely purposeful. I loved the themes. I really enjoyed following each of the different perspectives, even when it wasn't my favorite character, even when it wasn't a character who was necessarily good. When it was a bad character, I liked it. I liked how all of our characters are dynamic throughout the book, and how we keep getting surprised at different things that will happen. At any point in time, your favorite character can die, and for very little reason. Even though these characters have survived 99% of the population dying, there are still people dying left and right because of the collapse of society. It was really interesting to see the evil that still happens when it's human and when it's supernatural, when it's big, and when it's very small and pathetic. It was so great to read this with other people because it really motivated me to pick it up and continue. I will be thinking about this book for a very long time. This book is such an accomplishment, and I know that the size of it is very intimidating, but this is one of Stephen King's best. In a couple other of his books, I've really struggled with misogynistic language in it. Not a problem in here at all. So why is it in the other ones? I don't know. But I'm giving this a 5 fucking star. This was absolutely so worth the read, and it's one of the longest books that I've ever read in my life. Then in the car driving to and from Virginia, I listened to Four Lost Cities by Annalee Newitz. This is a nonfiction. Annalee Newitz has written some fiction that I really liked. The Future of Another Timeline is one of my favorite sci-fis, and I read their most recent release, The Terraformers, earlier in January. Before doing science fiction, Annalee Newitz was a scientific journalist, and this book talks about 4 different ancient cities. One, a Neolithic city in modern-day Turkey, Pompeii, Angkor in Cambodia, and Cahokia, which is in modern-day St. Louis. In 4 different sections, we look at how the city came to be, what the powers were that made it happen, some of what daily life was for a very average citizen, and then why those cities disappeared and were lost. And we see through these 4 cities, each of them have why it fell apart in common. It was because both climate disasters and political issues. This is a really interesting take on cities and urbanization in general. If you did read The Terraformers, or if you do, I think these 2 are very good to read in tandem because they are about cities. But this is a look into the past to reflect on our modern society. We have very rigid ideas of what a city, its purpose is, and since the Industrial Revolution, humanity has flocked to cities. But with climate problems and political turmoil, it is very likely that, like we have in the past, humanity will turn away from cities and more towards rural life. So I do wish that this book was longer because we have 4 independent sections that are each probably about 80 pages, and I would have loved to spend more time with each of these to have a better idea. I studied Latin for a long time and ancient Roman society, so Pompeii I felt like I had a very good background in, but I would have liked more information about the other cities. Pompeii was my favorite section. There were so many cool anecdotes about how we know what we know about Roman society, specifically because of Pompeii. My favorite fact is that we know Romans drove on the right side of the road because in Pompeii, you can see chunks cut out of curbs where people were missing their turn. Hot girls have always hit curbs. So this was a fun and informative nonfiction, but I do wish it was longer. Then for my book club 3 of clubs, the first quarter of 2023, we were reading forced proximity books, and the one that the club voted on and chose was Dance of Thieves by Mary E. Pearson. This is a sequel duology to the Remnant Chronicles series, and we have two main characters. One of them is Kazi. She is a former street thief. She stole so that she could live for years, and she has risen to the rank of one of the Vendon Queen's most elite guards. And then we have Jace, who is, after the sudden death of his father, he is the patriarch of this small, unrecognized kingdom. So the other countries see him as like this outlaw family that is controlling this city, but in reality, this community that sees itself as its own independent place and wants to be recognized as such. So Kazi is sent by her queen to Jace's city, Tor's Watch, so that she can see if any peace agreements have been breached. And they end up both getting kidnapped and shackled to each other, and they have to survive the wilderness for a little bit, and that brings them together in a way that neither of them anticipated they would ever be, and that starts a romantic relationship when they are very opposite politically and want different things. So for the Remnant Chronicles, I loved each of those books and was pleasantly surprised. I kept going in thinking, oh, well, I'm not gonna like this very much, but I did. And so with this one, I was hesitant, but I still thought, oh, you know, I think I'm probably gonna like this because the other one surprised me. Unfortunately, my luck ran out. Because this is a fantasy romance, I think if you are not invested in the romantic relationship, you're not going to quite enjoy the book. And while I liked how our characters balanced each other, and I liked them playing off each other, I liked them individually, I just wasn't sold on this relationship. I thought it was kind of insta-love. We have glimpses into the past of Jace's ancestors and what survival for them was like, but we only see bits and pieces, and I would have loved to have dived into that way more. This was really easy to get through, but I didn't really have a lot driving me to go forward because the things that were promised I don't necessarily think were executed on. So unless other people let me know that the sequel is a huge improvement on this book, I don't know that I am going to continue in this duology. So I ended up just giving this a 3-star. Then on the way back from Virginia, I started listening to Don't Cry For Me by Daniel Black. I've had my eye on this since this was a Book of the Month pick last year, but the audiobook sample really grabbed me. This is almost semi-autobiographical. Daniel Black's father passed away before the two of them could really reconcile. Daniel Black is queer, and the two of them never really got to make peace with the differences between the generations. And so this book, while it is fiction, it is Daniel Black essentially having his father write letters to him as he's dying. Our main character is Jacob, who is in his 60s and he is dying of cancer. His ex-wife is also dead, and his son is gay, and that is something that put a huge strain on his relationship because him and his wife did not agree with this at all, and they wanted to change this about their son, even though they loved him and was proud of him. Jacob is writing down essentially his life story and everything he's ever wanted to say to his son before he dies, because he feels like he cannot bridge the gap, so he can do it in this letter. So we follow Jacob when he is young, being raised by his grandparents, terrible things that he did when he was younger and the opinions that people held at that time, and then when he's young and in love with a woman, and then when he has a son and that son does not at all match up with what he's been raised that a man should be like, and the struggles of being a man and trying to be masculine all of the time, even though you love your kid and you want to express love, and really struggling to be in touch with your emotions. This book is heart-wrenching. Jacob is not the world's best character, which is evident from the very beginning. We know he has fucked up in the past, and the opinions that he holds that were put on him are not great. and he's trying to give us context for everything that he's done, and you understand why he was the way that he was, and we do get to see him change over the years when he becomes more literate and starts reading about the plights of Black people and Black women, and learning more about how he has harmed others, which makes this book so upsetting. And I hope that this book has brought Daniel Black closure. I really recommend this if you like the color purple, if you liked Things Fall Apart particularly. I really recommend this book. If you want anything that talks about masculinity and Blackness and those intersectionalities, I think that this is one of the best general fiction books that I've read in a really long time. It hurt in a way that was very well done. I think I'm at a 4.5 right now for this, and whether it goes more towards a 4 or a 5 will depend on how long this book stays in my mind. And the last book I read in March was Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. So I spent my money on the quarterly Brandon Sanderson books. So throughout 2023, I will be getting these nice leather-bound copies of his brand new releases. This is one of the books in the Cosmere. It's all themed green inside. There's a lot of art in here. Just spoilers for what I think is the first art in here. It's so beautiful. And this is inspired by The Princess Bride. It was written as a gift from Brandon to his wife, and she said, you have to share this with everyone, and I'm so glad that he did. I think this is so fun, and it could be accessible to a large audience, adult and young adult alike, but I think that this is best read if you have read Mistborn, at least the first trilogy already. So this is about our main character, Tress, who is a very normal girl and sees every other person as very special around her, and that she is just normal. And she is in love with Charlie, who is the Duke's son, who gets sent off to be married to somebody, but he essentially gets kidnapped by this sorceress, and Tress decides that she is going to save him. But to do that, she has to cross several different oceans, and oceans in this world aren't like normal oceans that we think of. They are made of spores, sand-like dangerous particles that through fluidization, which is a real scientific thing, there are air vents underneath these seas that turn these small particles to act like a liquid, which is so interesting. Everything about the science of the magic in this world is so good. Plus, this is narrated by one of the most beloved characters in the Cosmere. This is the first time that he's had a book that is narrated by him, and the humor is top notch. It is exactly the thing that I love Brandon Sanderson humor for. There is a talking rat, there's a ragtag pirate group that is trying to mutiny, and there is at the center of it Tress, who is a very determined young woman who is learning that she is something special and that everybody's special. And I really adored it. If I hadn't known this was inspired by The Princess Bride, I would have been able to tell. So if you're in love with it as much as I am, I think you should definitely pick this up. You can now buy the wide release of this. It won't look like this very special copy in particular, but it will still have the same wonderful story. So I think this is getting like a 4.5 again from me. Oathbringer is still my favorite Sanderson of the year, but this is so absolutely lovely. And if this was the only Brandon Sanderson book that was coming in the mail, I would be satisfied, but I am very excited to have 3 more. And now on to the books that I read in April. So April was a surprisingly productive reading month. Even though it's my last proper month of college, I still managed to read quite a bit partially due to participating in Realmathon, which was a very, very fun team-based readathon. I was part of Team Enya, which is based around reading fantasy books for more points. You could read whatever you wanted. But here is all the information about my April reads. I read 11 books for a total of 4,500 pages, had an average rating of 3.79. And as you can see, this is by far the most I've read in April. Maybe I should have taken senior year a little bit more seriously, but I'm gonna graduate, it's fine. So the first book that I read in April was Book Lovers by Emily Henry. This is the second of her books that I've read. I read People We Meet on Vacation last year, and that is one of my favorite rom-coms. I would put it up there. It wasn't quite a 5-star, but this one is about Nora, who is a, quote, cutthroat literary agent. She's very dedicated to her job and getting her clients what's best, and she ends up going on vacation with her sister to a small town that has been revitalized because it was the setting of one of her clients' books that got very big and is getting a movie. And she keeps running into Charlie, who was an editor who's equally as cutthroat, who actually turned down editing that same book. So these two are very much city people, not the typical romantic comedy protagonists. Meanwhile, Nora is trying to figure out what is up with her sister, who seems to be acting strange. Nora, as the older sister, is trying to fix everything for her. I like that this takes place in North Carolina. That's where I'm from. Small town vibe was great and not in an overly cliche way. I really liked the sister dynamic. I am an older sister myself, so I get Nora from that perspective. And I do think that Nora and Charlie have a good dynamic together. I felt like their relationship could have used a little bit more development. I also think I noticed in this book and the last book that the male protagonists shower all of this praise and compliments and everything on the female protagonist, and the female protagonist just thinks about it. And I think that Henry's protagonists could work on reciprocating their feelings to the male protagonist, because like that's gotta feel ridiculously one-sided. I think the best part of this book was the sister plot, but I did really like our ending when it came to these two, and overall I gave this probably about a 3.5. I think that comparing this to People We Met on Vacation, that one's more the favorite because it's more dramatic and there's more pining, but I think that these two characters are actually more likely to end up together. Then I read Weather Girl by Rachel Lynn Solomon. Solomon wrote The Ex-Talk, which is one of my favorite rom-coms of all time. This is about Ari, who has her dream job as a meteorologist working under her childhood hero. But the thing is that working with her childhood hero is not everything that she thought it would be, because her hero, Torrance, and Torrance's ex-husband are both working at the station, and they are constantly fighting and making the workplace awful for everyone. Ari ends up bonding with Russell, who is one of the sports reporters, over how bad the work environment has gotten, and the two of them decide that they're going to start forcing their bosses together to try to spark the flame again. Meanwhile, Ari's dealing with a breakup and also her own depression and her mother's history of mental illness, which put a large divide between the two of them. This was a super cute rom-com. I really like Ari as our main character. She feels very much like a real person. I love when we follow characters that are very passionate about what they do, which I have seen with both of Rachel Lynn Solomon's books. She's also a woman who has a good relationship with her own sexuality, which is cool to see in a rom-com. Russell is a big guy, he's fat, and he talks about that. The two of them also bond over being Jewish, which Rachel Lynn Solomon is Jewish, so she gets to talk about her own experiences there. I really loved how the two main characters interacted with each other when they start getting into a relationship together. I loved how that developed even more. The spicy scenes in this, there was only like one time where I was like, that was a weird choice, but other than that, I was like, this is great. Russ is also a single dad, and I liked Ari's interactions with his daughter, but there is a third act breakup in this, and I feel like it didn't need to go so far as be a breakup. Ari does have a conversation with her therapist, and the therapist says literally everything I wish I could say to Ari. So the author got it, but I still wish the breakup part didn't happen in the first place. Overall, super cute. I will be thinking about these two together for a hot minute. Not as much as I do the couple in the X talk, but I will be giving this a 4-star. Then for my book club, 3 of Clubs, for this quarter we are reading dystopian fiction, and the first pick was Our Missing Hearts by Celeste Ng. I have read both of Celeste Ng's other books, but those are more contemporary literary. This has that bit of dystopian. So we have Bird, who is our main character. He's 12. He is mixed race. His mother is Chinese and she was a poet, and his father is white and works at a university. Before he was born, there was an economic collapse in America that really shifted a lot of things, including the culture and politics in America, and a lot of Americans blame China for this. So there have been a lot of fascist laws that have been passed that are protecting American values and banning and censoring any sort of Chinese influence or people who question the government and that sort of thing. But we see all of this through Bird's point of view, who's 12, and this has been happening his entire life. He is starting to notice people demonstrating against the government. And his mother went missing years before without a trace, and all of a sudden he gets a note from her and he is determined to find her. This was so fucking amazing. I was nervous going into this because I knew some people who had read her other books had said that this was their least favorite of hers, but I think this might be my favorite. This still has her classic writing style and the way that she plays with familial relationships and how different people see the same thing and how there's so many things that you want to say to somebody you love but you can't. But now we also have this speculative element where Ng is talking about hate against Asian people, fascism and censorship, and all of these things are things that are going on in our everyday lives. So it's a dystopian, but it's not too far off from where we are already. I really liked Bird's perspective as we slowly figure out what this world actually looks like and how it seems kind of okay on the surface, but there are a lot of things that are being suppressed. We see his journey and also are leading up to a large demonstration against the government. This book was so good. It made my heart hurt. I had to put this book down multiple times because I was so angry. In the author's note, this made me so angry reading this book because everything is real. The writing style was fantastic. I really liked the characters, and I loved the way that we got to find out about the world. Things weren't just told to us at the beginning, it was released to us throughout the book. This was a very easy 5-star for me, and I will definitely be recommending this all the time now. And if you would like to join us for May, we will be reading How High We Go in the Dark. Then I read We Hunt the Flame by Hafsa Faizal. I picked this because my library had it on audiobook and I needed some big points for my team for Realmathon, and honestly my library is running out of a lot of audiobooks that I would have picked up already, so I thought I'd just give this a shot. This is a YA fantasy duology that is Middle Eastern inspired. So in this world, magic has been lost when these essentially immortal beings were killed or were lost, and now each of the 5 kingdoms has a plague put on them, and Zafira, our main character, lives in a place where it should be a desert, but it's snowing all the time, and she has put on this persona of the hunter, and she goes off and hunts in this dangerous forest that nobody's supposed to ever come back from, but she seems to know the terrain pretty well and hunts for food for her community. There's also this crown prince of the kingdoms who's been trained to be in the legendary League of Assassins, kind of ninja-like, and he has been trained to do nothing but kill, and he doesn't see his worth outside of that because of the way that his father has treated him. So these two are in very different places, but there is a campaign that is started to go to this mythical island to try to bring back magic, and the two of them are sent by different people to go to there. What I did really like about this book is I really loved the descriptions, the setting, the atmosphere, especially when they were describing the magical places. I really felt like I was there. However, this is the type of YA fantasy that I'm not really into anymore. I could not buy the romance, and I think that this does hinge on that a lot. There were a lot of character traits that were just repeated over and over again to the point where it just felt really redundant, which is weird because for the settings and everything felt very real, but the characters felt like I was being told and not shown. I did not like our love interest at all. I didn't see anything that would be really attractive about him. I like Saphira, but I don't get. I literally, not to be that girl, but I really thought that the villain was hotter in this one. So I'm gonna give this a 3. It wasn't objectively that bad, but I was just not into it. And then for Peace Talks, which is a 48-hour readathon that I did do a video vlogging, I started off with A Psalm for the Wild-Built by Becky Chambers. This is a sci-fi fantasy novella that is the start of a novella series where we follow Dex, who is a tea monk, and their job is to set up a little tea station and have people come to them with their problems, and Dex listens. And while Dex has gotten a lot of value out of this job, Dex is really tired, and they decide to go on a journey to this specific place where monks used to go. And in this world, robots ended up gaining sentience, and they essentially said, humans, we don't want to do what you have set for us anymore. We are going to go and live on our own and not talk to you guys anymore. For generations, humans have not seen robots, but on this journey, Dex ends up running into a robot, and they have sort of a cultural exchange, heart to heart, as they go on this journey together. This was so cute. For some reason, this really reminded me of Little Women, where every chapter, like, the characters learning something new about themselves, learning a lesson, and it was just very sweet. This is a book that I would give to somebody who's going through a hard time and doesn't have a lot of self-confidence, because this book made me feel so good about myself, and this is like therapy in 100 pages. Dex and the robot keep having misconceptions about the other person, and they talk through these misconceptions, which leads them to greater ideas about identity and that sort of thing. And it was all just very sweet, and I absolutely cannot wait to read more of this series. Very easily, I gave this a 4-star, and I can't wait to read more of these. Then I listened to Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson. This is a short literary fiction magical realism about a woman asked by an old friend of hers who actually betrayed her in the past to look over 2 children who spontaneously burst into flames whenever they feel too strongly. Our main character's interactions with these kids are so sweet, as they are essentially just shepherded into this small area and told not to do anything. And our main character, as an outsider and somebody who's been wronged by this type of people before, just wants to take care of these sweet kids. So this really felt like House on the Cerulean Sea to me. So if you liked that book, I think this would be a good one to pick up. This book is short enough that I don't feel like I have much else to say. I really did love this, and I gave it a very easy 4-star again. Then the last book that I read in that video was The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. finally. I have been avoiding this book for so long, but I finally got to it because it was one of my 12 friends, 12 books in 12 months recommendations. This is about our main character, Jude, who is a human, and in this world there is the human world, and hidden is fairy world, which is brownies and nixies and all these types of little creatures, and they don't look like the Sarah J. Maas fae. They look like human-sized but fairy creatures with horns and tails and different colored skin. Jude's parents were murdered by a fairy when she was younger, and her sisters were taken by this fairy to live in the fairy world, and so she has been raised as a human among fairies, and fairies look down on humans. She's not treated very well, even though she is kind of part of the nobility by adoption. There is a large political shift that is about to happen as the king is about to step down and name one of his children the next monarch. She gets involved with some spying that gets her put in a situation she didn't think she was going to be in, but she's actually very well suited for. I did like Jude as a main character quite a lot. I felt like she is an active protagonist. I feel like in a lot of YA fantasies, things just happen to the main character, but we actually have Jude being the one that makes the plans. The interactions between Jude and Cardan, who is the cruel prince, I wasn't really sold on it. It doesn't seem from Jude's perspective that she should be into him at all. He's very much pulling on her pigtails at the beginning, and then like some of his friends actually try to murder her. There's a whole lot going on here. I would be interested in continuing on in this series, but it won't be a priority. So I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. If you want to hear all of my thoughts on that book, if you want to hear more of my thoughts on any of those last 3 books, you should definitely go watch the video. And then I read The Toll by Neil Shusterman. This is the last book in the Scythe series, where we are in a world where humanity has conquered death, but the problem is that that's not good for population control. So there are people who are endowed with being a scythe, which is a person who kills so many people so that the population stays under control. And we have a couple of people in the first book who are being trained as scythes, and now in The Toll, there are some major political changes that have gone on since the end of book 2 that has greatly shifted society. The Thunderhead is doing its best to push all the right players into the right places so that humanity is not entirely doomed. I was really let down by book 2, but I think that this third book came back to what I really liked about the first book. And I liked that it was also a wider scope. In our first book, we really do just follow our 2 main characters, but in this one, we have gotten to a broader scope. And also, we're not even following a completely linear timeline, which I thought was interesting. And this ended up going in a direction I would not have predicted from the beginning of the series at all. It was not the typical YA taking down of a bad guy. I also liked that we talked about gender in this book. Right before this character was introduced, I was thinking about how essentially race has been eliminated at this point in the world because people have intermingled so much that everyone's a little bit of everything. But like, queer people aren't normal. I don't see any people who seem to be trans or anything, and then we have a character who is gender fluid. So overall, I would put this as my second favorite in the series because I think that I had enough space from the series that I wasn't as in love with our characters at this point. So the first book is still my favorite, but I am giving this a solid 4. Then, gifted by NetGalley, I read The Other Side of Infinity by Joan F. Smith. This is a contemporary YA magical realism about December and Nick. So Nick is a lifeguard at his neighborhood pool, and a teacher that he knows ends up starting to drown, and Nick freezes up when he tries to save him, and this girl he doesn't know ends up helping him save the teacher. Then she runs away, and Nick is settled with all this guilt of people saying that he saved this man, even though he knows that without this other girl that he would not have saved him at all. And December is this girl, and she actually has this ability where she can see past, present, and future from just about anybody's perspective. So she's not quite omniscient. There is rules that go along with it. She knew that Nick would have to go through this. He was going to save the teacher's life, but he was going to be permanently disabled from this event. And December decided, even though she's never been able to change the future before, she finally tries to do it, and she does help him save this man, and now she sees a future in which her and Nick fall in love, but Nick dies. The two of them end up starting to date and bonding over December's missing mother, who she actually cannot see anything that has to do with her mom, even though she can see anything else. I really liked the magical system of this, of December being able to see things. I thought that it had really good rules and it made sense, but I didn't really care for the YA contemporary plot of this. Nick's perspective was not nearly as interesting to me. I thought all of the friends were really stock characters. It felt like the book was going one way at the beginning, and then it kind of stagnated and didn't do anything about it. As we went on further, I cared less and less about these characters, but I was still wanting these mysteries to be resolved. The mystery of her mother, I didn't love how that was resolved, and the solution of finally counting down to, like, is Nick gonna die? I absolutely hated how that was resolved. Out of left field, and it didn't match with the tone of the book at all. There was a lot of potential here with this magical system. I love a good YA magical realism, but it didn't end up, I don't think it said what it wanted to say. So I think I'm giving this a 2.5 or 3 star. This one wasn't for me. And then I listened to Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Sulin Tun. This was so good. I had been told it was going to be so good, and I didn't quite believe it, but it was fantastic. So our main character, Xinyan, as the title would suggest, is the daughter of the moon goddess, but her father is also the legendary archer from Chinese mythology who shot down the 9 extra suns. Her father was given an elixir of immortality because he did this, and her mother, when she was pregnant with her, was struggling with her health, and to save her and Xinyan, she decided to take the elixir of immortality, but was then punished by the gods for doing this and imprisoned in the moon. Xinyan is not supposed to exist and is actually breaking the rules that the immortals put on her mother to not have anyone visit her. So when they start to figure out that Xinyan exists, so there might be somebody there, she is whisked away. There's something that goes wrong. She ends up being essentially abandoned and has to become a servant, but ends up running into the crown prince, and through her own skills and the help of the prince thinking that she's pretty cool, she ends up becoming his study buddy essentially, and ends up training with him and studying with him, and the two of them start to fall for each other. But his parents are the ones who put her mom in the moon, and there's some drama going on with that, and he is betrothed to another, and it's just, Xinyan is going on this years-long journey trying to win the emperor's favor so that she can release her mother from the moon, and this is such a good journey. If you liked Cersei, this is the book for you. I love the magic. I love Xinyan as a main character so fucking much. I love the love interest. There's not a single thing I didn't absolutely love about this book. The descriptions are great. I love the dialogue. I love how these characters interact with each other. I love that we're going over the course of years, but it doesn't feel like we're missing anything. It was paced in a very good way. There's just so much good in this book that I cannot fully express, and I need somebody to talk about this book with, and I cannot fucking wait to read the next book. If people do not have a happily ever after, I will die inside. So this was very, very, very easy 5-star. Please read this book. Listen to the audiobook as well. I thought it was really well done, and you figure out how to pronounce everything at least close to correct. And the last book that I read in April was The Blood Mirror by Brent Weeks. This is the 4th book in the Lightbringer series, which is semi-industrial fantasy. I think the technology is supposed to be around the 17th century, but this is a world where there is a magic system that is based around the light spectrum. So certain people can draft what is called luxin. So when they see a certain color, they can use that to create this physical material called luxin, and each of the colors have different properties. Some people can draft multiple colors of luxin, and there is one person per generation called the Prism, who is essentially like a Jesus figure who can draft all the colors. And there was a war previously over power, and we have this family called the Giles, and they have their hands in everything. 4 books into this very chunky fantasy series, it's hard to describe where we are right now, but Gavin, who was the Prism, is being laid low. He is trapped again. Karis has gotten this position that she really deserves and is now in power and the focus of a lot of people. Andros is being the awful villain that he is still, and Kip is off on his own, trying to fight the evil people who were trying to take over the world. This, unfortunately, was my least favorite of the series so far. I just felt like every single one of our plot lines I was less interested in than in previous books. Taya, I didn't really care for the order plot that she was having. I thought Gavin's plot, like, while I liked the conversations that he was having, felt like redundant compared to the last book where he was also trapped. Kip's plot was a lot of people bickering with each other all the time, and I just didn't care. And I'm not sure how to feel about Tissus at all. I would say that Karis's plotline was what I cared about the most in the book, but overall I don't feel like this book was resolved in a really satisfying way. Like, this is just build up for book 5, which I've also heard mixed reviews of. So considering how the other books have really surprised me, there was not a plot twist that really blew me away. There were definitely plot twists in this, but like I didn't care and they didn't like hit me. While it was fast to get through, I just wanted to finish it because I wanted to get points for Realmathon, and less because I was really trying to get back into this world again, which was really disappointing. This was a letdown for this series. I'm still giving it like a 3.5. I like what some of our characters are learning about ourselves and the self-discovery that they're having. That's good. I like that. But the plot itself of this was just about a miss at every turn for me. But yes, those were all the books that I read in April and in March. So let me know what you read in these last 2 months. What were your favorite books? Were there any books that you actually hated? Let me know. If you would like to follow me anywhere, my link is in the description with links to literally everything I do. I have some fun vlogs coming up once I finally graduate college in a couple days from when this is being filmed. When this comes out, I will have already graduated. So make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss those. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.